Well, this is the long-anticipated report, Mike, and we got into this in depth on the Sunday Wire last night. And if you want a more detailed analysis, a longer segment, go ahead and listen to that up at 21stcenturywire.com. Mike and I went through some of the P's and Q's of this much-anticipated report. This is the report on the alleged chemical weapons attacks in Douma in April of 2018. So the OPCW has finally released their findings on this, and it's meant to, a lot of people were expecting this is going to implicate the Syrian government and by extension the Russians, because they're allied and working in the same areas in Syria for that war. So here is the report. There's the OPCW. They're based in The Hague. And what did this report show us this time? A lot of people thought that, well, here's the report itself. This is from the Technical Secretariat, their fact-finding mission. It's quite a long document. This is available online. You're very welcome, everybody, to go and inspect this document. There's a link to it at 21stcenturywire.com, or you can simply Google it or go to the OPCW's website, and I encourage people to do that. So here's what we discovered from this. These are some of the main takeaways. These are not all the main takeaways, and we will do probably a more in-depth analysis of this on another program, Mike, to do a follow-up on this. But this is what's important. Chlorine substances were present. Yellow cylinders may have been the source of those. So the gas release mechanism was not discussed. Witnesses' testimonies are inconsistent and rely heavily on, guess who?
The white helmets.
The white helmets. So the OPCW has not assigned blame. Okay, that's also important, although it seems some people in the media and people really pushing for regime change in Syria, the usual suspects, we'll mention a few of those in a minute, are assigning blame. They're using this report to assign blame. But there is no evidence of a chemical weapons attack in this report, okay? There is chlorine, that's the important part. There's some chlorine substances present. They're not necessarily weaponized chemical weapons, chlorine. They could be, but there's a lot more questions left unanswered here. So no traces of sarin. This is really important. This was the big talking point a year ago, that probably it was a mixture of sarin and chlorine. Why is this important? We'll show you in a minute. No bodies to prove that the victims died by a chlorine bomb. So if there was no sarin, that means the victims in those horrific YouTube videos that everybody held up and saw, there were 2 sets of YouTube videos. Again, this is very complex, and we only have a limited time to show you what we're going to show you here. But that means the victims who died, Mike, would have had to have been killed by chlorine, right? So there are no bodies. So these are huge problems with this investigation. And the images of the children the foaming mouths is actually brought under question here. So this is what's important. So this was just a few weeks ago. This is the Riam Dalati, BBC producer and researcher who worked on saving Syria's children. He tweeted this, and we reported on this at the UK column when it happened, but he said, "I can prove without a doubt that the Douma hospital scene was staged." This is really important. And he followed up with this, as one of the 3 or 4 people filming the scene was Dr. Abu Bakr Hanan, a brute and shifty doctor affiliated with Jaish al-Islam. Well, we knew it was staged when it was released. How did we know that? Well, because the White Helmets released a video and because the children weren't showing any symptoms of a chemical attack. It seemed like they were just being hosed down with a garden hose, but the media ran with it nonetheless and said it was a chemical attack, and they said there was sarin, and the White Helmets fake hospital scene. This is the media, I call him a media victim. His name was Hassan Daib. Here he is before. This is what went out in the press. Okay, this is the underground hospital in Douma. He's being hosed down by the White Helmets, and they're saying this is a sarin attack. You see the little girl in the background? All these kids have been hosed down, babies with respirator masks on, making it look like they're having they're been attacked by the Assad regime in a chlorine or a sarin attack.
And most of these kids, a lot of these kids having inhalers shoved down their throats as well.
Nebulizers, yes, and inhalers shoved into their mouth and then pulled, and then they're filming that. So this was part of the White Helmets media production for this event. And here he is afterwards, He had no effects of any chemical weapons. So this scene at the hospital in Douma was faked. This was staged, beyond any doubt, okay? So there's already fakery here, Mike, at this scene. And the media have already used this as a pretext to launch a cruise missile strikes and airstrikes by the US, UK, and France, okay? This part has already been used, was used to justify the airstrike, and it was fake. It's proven fake. The OPCW report also backs up that it probably had staging, but we know that 100% this was a faked scene. It was filmed, and the politicians swallowed it hook, line, and sinker.
They've never done that before, have they?
They would never do that. No, they of course not. They would have learned after Iraq. And so this is why this is important. No sarin, no traces of sarin. In fact, Mike, no banned scheduled substances found in this report. But this is from, Mike, a year ago. This is April 11th, 2018. And deadly sarin gas used in Syria chemical attack leaves victims foaming at the mouth before suffering seizures.
And that's the Daily Mail?
That's the Daily Mail. That was being pumped out across many different media outlets, all the broadcast news channels in the US. Everybody was using these talking points, okay? And look at the image they're using below. That's the children in the hospital being hosed down. That's fake. It has nothing to do even with what they're accusing this of being, this with sarin poisoning of the kids. On the other video in the basement, all the dead bodies with the foaming at the mouth, okay?
Yeah.
So there's two bits of fakery here. This is really important. They're pushing this really hard, sarin, because that was the justification. Those videos that came out of the dead children with the foam is attached to the sarin talking point.
Yeah.
Now the sarin talking point is finished, okay? It's dead. So that means they don't have an answer for all the kids with what looks like shaving cream sprayed into their mouths and coming out of their nostrils, okay? We don't know exactly what it is because there are no bodies that anybody can find to do any autopsies on. Apparently they didn't think that was important enough to do any forensic medical analysis to find out what actually might have killed the children and people in the videos of the dead bodies, okay? Now, why is this important? Well, this queued up the experts, Mike, at the time. This is Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. He is one of the go-to guys for the mainstream media on the subject of chemical weapons. And they asked him, and sarin talking point was front and center at that time. So you can go through and you can read and a lot of the statements made and tweets by Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. But these are the sort of experts they would call up to sort of help to advance these claims, okay? This was the article here, and if you go to this article on the Telegraph, if you manage to punch through the paywall, you'll see statements. It looks possibly to be a mixture of chlorine and the nerve agent sarin, and of course there's a totally unrelated image that's saying children receiving oxygen after a chemical weapons attack in Douma. That's a lie. Okay, so this is fake news all around. We're going back a year later, and we're just showing you one example of thousands of a Niagara Falls of fake news and disinformation in the wake of the Douma attacks, just in the 72 hours after the event, okay? So the establishment, rearguard action, then you have people like Elliot Higgins here in a panic, trying to deflect. This was what he tweeted on March 2nd. He said, two unnamed U.S. officials claimed blood and urine from Douma tested positive for chlorine and a nerve agent, but the OPCW was quite clear there was no sign of a nerve agent in chlorine. Chlorine wasn't detectable in blood and urine, so where's the evidence? So this is rearguard action by the establishment. This is Bellingcat founder Elliot Higgins, who is trying to deflect here. Why? Because people like Elliot Higgins and others were pushing, were talking about kind of greasing the tracks for this sarin talking point. This was what was needed for an airstrike. Chlorine was not enough. This is the important part, okay? What Elliot is pointing to here might possibly be true. This is a break from his usual routine. He's actually challenging one of the NATO member states' claims here, but of course he waited a year to do it, as it's convenient now because the whole story is falling apart. The OPCW report is a total flop, and so you're getting things like this. So that's fake news. So here's when we get into the really bizarre stuff of this report. And I encourage people to go and read this report. The magic cylinder. Look in the background. This is the famous selfie taken by one of the moderate rebels with an old gas mask on. But in the background is a yellow canister on a beautiful bed there, and that's meant to be a chlorine bomb. Okay. How did it get on the bed? Well, one would think that it fell through the ceiling, right? Well, not according to the OPCW. And here we get to the mystery of the magic cylinder. And you can see this is a screenshot from the internal part of this graphic. The white part is actually from the OPCW's report. Apparently, Mike, this magic cylinder landed on the floor in the bottom corner of the room and managed to jump up into the air and 2 meters away in a diagonal fashion and jump up onto the bed, like all randy yellow cylinders do. So how did that happen? There's no explanation for it. They don't offer any explanation for it at all. It's just left there as a kind of a JFK magic bullet mystery, okay? And so I guess they're working on an explanation for this. So stay tuned. Bellingcat might have some explanation for how this miracle of physics took place. But this alone, Mike, discredits the report in many people's opinion. And this is the central talk. They need to make this work, because without this, they don't have their Assad regime dropped a chlorine bomb from a helicopter. They absolutely need this to work. This report, some of it is utterly ridiculous. And we're just giving you an honest opinion here. So what does the evidence really tell us? Well, it tells us that the hospital scene was staged, that the casualty numbers were faked. They claimed in the media, Mike, and I'll show you Theresa May's speech, but that there was 500 people treated for chemical weapons attack and 70 people died. You read the report, they can't decide whether it was 40, 70, and even then the witness statements are totally conflicting. Some say none, okay? So the MSN, the US, UK governments, the Sarin claims were a lie. This is what we've learned from this report. The blood and the urine samples were fake. They never existed. If we haven't seen them by now, they don't exist. They would have been produced anyway, right? So the main witnesses are terrorist affiliated, including the white helmets. That's a fact. The magic cylinder discredits the airdrop theory, at least for that particular cylinder. There's another cylinder that's, we're told, landed on a roof, magically punched a hole in the roof and then reversed a few inches and then sprayed its gas down into the 3 floors into the basement of a building and killed all these people. That's the other conspiracy theory that we didn't want to get into. That's even more magical than this magic cylinder in some ways. And the images of children foaming at the mouth are more than likely staged based on the questions raised in this OPCW report. Of course, we're going to interpret this totally differently than people who are totally going hell for leather to bomb the Syrians, Mike. Why is this important? Think about this. There's no sarin, Mike. So I turned back the time machine to Theresa May's big speech, fire and brimstone speech last April after this, putting her case to bomb Syria. And here's what she said at the time. She said, on Saturday, the 7th of April, 75 people, including young children, were killed in a horrific attack in Douma, and there were 500 further casualties. Did she have any confirmation of this at the time?
No.
But she's speaking as if it happened, right? But it didn't happen.
No.
According to the evidence. Okay, that didn't happen. What else did she say? Well, let's see. UK medical and scientific experts have analyzed open source reports. That's things floating around on the internet. Open source is things on the internet. Images and video footage from the incident concluded that the victims were exposed to a toxic chemical. How could they know?
But we haven't seen any bodies.
There's no bodies, so it's just based on watching YouTube videos. Is this a way for a government to gather intelligence and then use that to decide whether they're going to attack another sovereign member of the United Nations? By YouTube?
That's a very good question.
Watching YouTube videos? That's enough? Interesting question. So this is corroborated by first-hand accounts from NGO and aid workers, the White Helmets, funded by the UK government, terrorist-affiliated, share facilities with Jabhat al-Nusra in different sites in Syria. Members include people in militant groups, armed. That's a fact. So while the World Health Organization received reports, which reports, we're not sure, and from who, we don't know, that hundreds of patients arrived at Syrian health facilities on Saturday night with signs and symptoms consistent with exposure to toxic chemicals. That's not true. We showed you the hospital scene was faked. So this statement is not true either. So what is true in this speech, Mike? I kept digging. And maybe this is true. Let's try this. And based on our assessment, we do not think that these reports could be falsified on this scale. Oh, really? Okay. Well, is there any more? I kept looking. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the Syrian regime has reportedly been attempting to conceal evidence by searching evacuees from Douma to ensure samples are not being smuggled out from the area. What do you reckon? Do you think that's true, Mike?
I don't think that's true.
What do you think that is?
I think that's
fake
news.
Of course it's fake news. So, and last but not least, open source accounts state that barrel bombs were used to deliver the chemicals. Is that true?
No.
I don't think so. That's also fake news. I'm showing you 10% of her speech, Mike. And I guarantee you, if I showed you the other 90%, it's pretty much the same thing. The whole thing is a total fabrication. Okay, so, and finally she said, we will continue to strengthen the international coalition we have built since the attack.
On Salisbury.
On Salisbury. Well, there you go, Mike. It all comes together nicely in the end, doesn't it? What do you think of that?
We've come full circle here, Patrick.
It's a great story, isn't it?
Absolutely.